Picture the coldest winter you can imagine. Now remove the heating, electricity, insulated walls, heated cars, supermarkets, and every emergency system you take for granted. No warm room waiting at the end of the day. No thermostat to turn up when the temperature drops. No quick trip to a store when food runs low. Now imagine having to sleep through that winter anyway. For ancient humans, this was not a rare emergency. In many of the environments they lived in, cold seasons returned again and again. So how did they survive? The obvious answer might be that they were simply better at tolerating cold. But surviving winter was never just about enduring low temperatures. It meant staying warm, finding food, moving through dangerous conditions, resting safely, and then doing it all again the next day. Surviving one freezing night was difficult. Surviving weeks or months of winter was a completely different problem. Because ancient humans did not need to solve winter once. They had to keep solving it. And the answer did not begin with conquering the cold. It began with solving one problem at a time. Winter attacked from more than one direction. Cold pulled heat from the body. Wind made exposure worse. Snow and frozen ground changed how people moved through the landscape. Food could become harder to find. And every hour spent staying warm required energy that eventually had to be replaced. So ancient humans were not facing one problem. They were facing several at the same time. They needed protection from exposure. They needed a safe place to rest. They needed enough energy to keep their bodies working. And they needed a way to survive not just tonight, but the days and weeks that followed. The first step was to solve the most immediate problem. How do you create warmth when the entire world around you is cold? The first major advantage ancient humans had was that they did not have to make the entire landscape warm. They only had to make a small part of it survivable. A protected space could block some of the wind, reduce exposure, and help hold warmth close to the people inside it. A source of heat could become far more useful when that heat was not constantly being carried away by the environment. That changed the situation completely. Outside, humans had almost no control over the temperature, the wind, or the weather. But inside a protected space, they could begin changing the conditions around their bodies. For the first time, winter did not have to be endured at full strength every moment of the day. There could be a place to return to, a place to warm up, a place to recover, a place where surviving the next few hours became more manageable. But that solution only worked while you stayed there. And ancient humans could not spend an entire winter sitting inside one protected space. They still had to move. They had to search for resources, travel through the landscape, and do the work required to stay alive. Which created the next problem. What protected a human when the protection couldn't stay in one place? A shelter could protect the body only after you reached it. But winter existed everywhere in between. So protection had to become portable. Clothing, coverings, and other forms of insulation could create a layer between the body and the cold environment outside. That did not make winter harmless. But it could reduce heat loss and give people more time to move, work, and travel before exposure became dangerous. And that changed what was possible. A person no longer depended entirely on reaching shelter before facing the cold. Some protection could travel with them. That meant ancient humans could move through environments that would otherwise force them to remain close to a single source of warmth. But portable protection created another limit. You can walk. You can work. You can generate heat through activity. But eventually you have to stop. And when you stop, the body loses one of its simplest defenses. Movement. You have to rest. You have to sleep. And for hours at a time, you are far more vulnerable to the cold around you. So the next challenge was not simply where to find shelter. It was how to survive during the hours when you could do almost nothing to protect yourself. Moving through winter is difficult. But becoming still can be even more dangerous. During the day, activity can help the body produce heat. Walking, working, and carrying out daily tasks all keep the body active. Sleep changes that. 4 hours, a person becomes far less able to respond to a changing environment. If the place where they rest offers little protection, cold can continue taking heat from the body long after the day's movement has stopped. That made nighttime survival its own problem. Ancient humans needed more than somewhere to escape the weather for a few minutes. They needed a place where the conditions around them could remain stable enough to rest and recover. A successful winter shelter was not simply a roof. It was part of a larger system that made stopping possible. And stopping mattered because no human can survive winter by staying active forever. But even a safe night created no guarantee about the next day. You could wake up warm enough to continue. then faced the same cold again. And again. Eventually, the problem became bigger than warmth, clothing, or one night's shelter. Winter was not a single event. It was a season. And surviving a season required something more than getting through each day as it came. A warm place could help you survive tonight. Clothing could help you move tomorrow. Shelter could make rest safer. But none of those things solved a problem that became more serious the longer winter lasted. Energy. The body needs fuel to keep functioning, and staying warm demands even more from it. But winter could make that fuel harder to obtain. Resources that were available during one part of the year might become scarce later. Movement could become more difficult. Finding food could require more effort at exactly the time when the body needed energy most. That meant survival could not always depend on what happened to be available that day. Preparation became part of the answer. What people gathered before conditions became severe, what they could preserve or store, and what resources remained accessible during the cold could affect whether they were still able to function weeks later. Now the scale of the problem had changed. This was no longer about one person trying to stay warm through one freezing night. It was about maintaining enough warmth, protection, energy, and resources for long enough to outlast an entire season. And that reveals something important. None of the solutions we have seen could survive winter alone. So what actually made the difference? The answer was not one invention. It was not simply fire. It was not simply clothing. It was not simply shelter. And it was not simply having enough food. The real advantage came from the way these solutions supported one another. Warmth was useful, but people still had to move. Portable protection made movement possible, but eventually people had to rest. Shelter made rest safer, but surviving a season still required energy and resources. Preparation helped provide those resources, but preparation itself depended on people having the knowledge, tools, and ability to keep solving problems before winter made them harder. That is what changes the way we should look at ancient human survival. They were not waiting for one perfect solution to make winter safe. They were building a chain of solutions where each one covered a weakness the others could not. And winter survival depended on that chain continuing to work. If one part failed, the others became more important. A warm shelter meant little if there was no energy to keep the body functioning. Food meant little if exposure made it impossible to reach safety. Clothing helped during movement, but it could not replace a place to rest. The remarkable achievement was not that ancient humans became immune to winter. They never did. It was that they learned how to build a way of life in which the cold did not have to decide the outcome every single day. That may be the biggest difference between their world and ours. Modern humans usually experience winter through layers of protection that are already in place. Heat waits inside buildings. Food can often be replaced with a trip to a store. Transportation, communication, and countless other systems quietly reduce dangers that once had to be managed directly. We experience the result. Ancient humans had to maintain the process. They could not stop winter from arriving. They could not make the cold disappear. But they could prepare for it, protect themselves from it, and combine enough solutions to keep going when conditions became difficult. And perhaps that's the most remarkable part of their story. They didn't need to conquer winter. They only needed to make survival possible within it.